ladies and gentlemen, and as I say in the circus, and children of all ages, welcome. I'm glad to be here with you people, and I'll do my best to say something. I know that you know that on December the 6th, 1941 was a pretty good day because I spent the day in Honolulu with my brother and a neighbor that we were raised by in Fallbrook. Spent the day. That night we went to the Battle of the Bands at Block Recreation Center in Pearl Harbor, not knowing what was going to happen the next morning. December the 7th, right after breakfast, we were all standing around and we weren't very happy. We were all pretty PO'd. Can you say that? Okay. We had orders that we had to work all day, open all of the bottoms, the water bottoms, the oil tanks, everything in the ship had to be completely open. Some general was going, or some admiral was going to have an inspection on the next day. We were just finished breakfast, and the ship, I was on the USS Oklahoma, and the ship shuddered, and it's the only way I can explain it. And as soon as it did that, there was some action where the ship was starting to list to port. The general alarm went for us to get to our battle stations. My battle station was a fire room number 6, as far down as you can go on there. And by the time I got to my battle station, my fire room had already been flooded, because as the ship was starting to port, we were being torpedoed at the same time. By the time that we were completely upside down, we had been hit with 9 torpedoes, which you know what that could do. I was fortunate enough to be able to get down to my fire room, but like I say, it was flooded, so there's a compartment above the boiler rooms where the crews of the other fire rooms meet with the officer in charge. And so we were all up in this little room, and they passed the word to maintain watertight everything, doors and windows or whatever. And the only thing is that above this room that we were in was a hatch, and it only about yay big, but it was 14 inches thick, and I believe that the torque of the ship moving like it was, they couldn't get it secured. And the officer in charge said to Parkinson and Grand Prix and Battles, and you get up there and secure this hatch from topside, which we did. We stayed there until the abandoned ship, we were told to abandon ship. We had to leave the ship. We could not open that hatch again, and most of our boiler crews were locked up down in there, and 2 of my best buddies were on watch down below, and this one of the men that they had me go up, his brother was in one of the other boiler rooms, and we could not open the hatch again. The hatch did not get opened again. So that's why we lost most of the fire people, boilermen. So we made our way off the ship. I tried to make our way off the ship, and I was able to get up by the grace of God, and somebody was looking out after the old man, and I got up to my living quarters, and there was a ladder from my living quarters to the next deck, and it was wobbling loosely, and I got up on a couple of steps, but I couldn't get far enough to reach the door to get me outside. Some officer behind me grabbed me by my shoes, and he pushed me so I could get up there and get my hands on the combing of this door. And when I turned back to see maybe he could get hold of me again and save himself, he'd slipped down, he'd slipped back below, and I know that he never made it. So he saved my life at that time. When we got the door open, the ship was going over pretty fast. So what we did, we walked down the side of the ship as the ship was capsizing, and we got down. We got completely capsized, and the strafing started. The strafing killed our chief bandmaster. His name was Bowie, and killed the younger man that I named my son after, and also the brother of this other one. I got off it. After that, they helped us. We were tied up to the Maryland, and they helped us get aboard the Maryland. They took some of our gunners and put on the Maryland's guns. Our ship never fired a shot at all, and we were on the Maryland about 10 minutes, and they dropped 2 bombs on the Maryland, almost like they did on the Arizona. Some of the ship's company told us to get the hell off the ship, excuse me, and so we dove off there and we went over to the airstrip, and we helped take the wounded and some of the dead into the makeshift morgue that they had, because the airstrip was devastated and so many casualties. I got to thinking, and I didn't do that very often, but my brother was with me on the ship, and he was trapped in a washroom, the engineer's washroom, and on the battleships, the portholes were larger than on most of the other ships, and with help, somebody could make it through these bigger portholes. So my brother and 9 others were trapped after the ship was completely rolled over, and a chief water tender that I worked for and our Catholic chaplain were trapped in the washroom the same, and they pushed 10 men out through these enlarged portholes. When it came time for the chaplain to go, the chief couldn't go because he was a typical chief in the Navy, and I hope there's not too many chiefs here in the Navy.
Just one.
Just one? I figured that. The chaplain was a very slim person, and I imagine that after my brother and the others came out that they tried to help him out, and he never did, and he never made it. The ship wasn't salvaged, or it wasn't taken up for 18 months, but when they raised the Oklahoma, they found evidence that the breviary, the book that the priest carries, had caught on the hardware, and he didn't make it. So then my other worry right away was, where is my brother? So for over 2 weeks, looked high and low for my brother. Didn't know that he got out, didn't know if he did, where he was. And then about 2 weeks later, somebody said, I think that your brother is on the Jarvis. And it was it was a destroyer that was that came in, and they had put in on it almost as soon as he got off the ship. My brother got to go home at one time after that, and shortly after that, it was on August the 9th, he was on the Jarvis, and they had been in a battle, and they came into Tulagi, I think it was, to get their wounded off of the ship. And they were told, I can't tell you this, no. My brother is here, he knows what I mean. We had some information that never should have happened, but anyway, the officer in charge of the ship took off in the middle of the night after being told to stay there until they had somebody to tow them to Australia so they could come back to the States for repair. So that night they ran into an ongoing sea battle, and the Japanese Air Force saw them, and all hands on the Jarvis were lost when the Air Force just blew them to kingdom come. An ironic thing about that is that the captain of the USS Chicago, who was in charge of that ship at that time and was on the Oklahoma, on the 6th of December, he and the admiral of the Maryland left their ship, and they went to the admiral's home, the other side of Diamond Head. And then as soon as after the attack came, they came back to the ship, and big deal, to do all the help they could do. And if you want to really find out more about that, just read Day of Deceit, and you'll see what had happened. My father went to watch. My father was the captain of an oil tanker, and he at one time went to Washington to see the big shots about a letter that my brother had smuggled off the ship, and he was questioning them about what happened here, and they told him if he didn't get out of where he was that they would be court-martialing him. They didn't want anything to do about that. A few months after Pearl Harbor, I was sent to the USS Northampton, and that's when we took Doolittle to Tokyo, which was very interesting, and a lot of you people have seen the deal where Doolittle took off. And if you notice, when Doolittle took off, that his plane started down toward the water. The only reason that his plane didn't make it, all of us on the Northampton were out there like this. And we believed that we did get him up that way. So I stayed on the Northampton, and we took part in a lot of the skirmishes that were going on. And on the night of November 30th, December 1, 1942, we were in Guadalcanal, and we were torpedoed, 2 torpedoes, and we were sunk in Guadalcanal. There were 661 of us on the ship, and 49 were lost. There were over 600 in the water, and we were swimming toward the beach. And we were out there a few hours, and the water started bubbling up in front of us, and we wondered what that was. We finally decided that it was the shore battery. The Japanese shore battery knew we were out there, and so they were doing their best to kill us out there in the water. So we just had to turn around and start swimming back out. But we heard a noise coming toward us, and we didn't know if it was a Japanese ship, because Japanese people were pretty well known to go, if a bunch of men in the water, they would just go right on through them, because they didn't want to take any prisoners. The same as some of our people did the same thing, and you can't blame them. So it was the Fletcher, the USS Fletcher picked us up and brought us into a port. And so they sent us home. We got a 30-day leave out of it. And then they put me on the new battleship. They put me on the Iowa. And I got on the Iowa. We went back to the South Pacific. And I stayed on the Iowa until the war ended. But one thing that a lot of people don't know, before we went, after we were commissioned, we took Roosevelt to Dakar, to one of the deals where all those people are going to drink it up, and which is good. Before we left, they put a big gangway on there, cases and cases and cases of you know what, because they were going to have this big deals. And we made a speed run to through the Mediterranean, dumped him off, and then we went to Bahia, Brazil for 3 days, and then went back, picked him up. One day coming back from there, Roosevelt was sitting up there on the deck, and a beautiful day, and he wanted to see, you know, what we could do. So they were going to show him some of the things that we could do. And I happened to be on watch that day, and during what was going on topside, there was one big explosion, and we didn't know what it was. The smoke watch told us that he thought that it was an ash can from a destroyer that had got loose. Years later, we found out that it was a torpedo that one of our destroyers had let go, and I believe it was the USS Porter. They put all the men under guard, and they were going to court-martial everybody, I guess, until they found out what had happened.
Can you imagine being part of so much history? Okay, that Parky was, okay?
So anyway, that's a bird's eye view of what I did that day. And I appreciate talking to you people, and that's my story.
I became an Army nurse I was accepted in the Army in April of 1941 after having graduated as an RN from Western Pennsylvania Hospital School of Nursing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my first station was at Camp Lee, Virginia, which I understand now is called Fort Lee. At that time it was Camp Lee, brand new area where we didn't even have any water to drink ourselves for our employees and nurses. We had water was brought in for our patients, and we were warned not to touch that we had to get our fluids from the PX. So we all developed a terrible craving for Coca-Cola. Anyway, I stayed in Virginia for, I think it was around July or August from April. And one morning when we came off night duty, on our bulletin board there was a request for 3 nurses to sign up for a 2-year tour of duty in Hawaii and 3 for a 2-year tour of duty in the Philippines. So the 6 of us got together and we kind of debated and drew names to see who was going to go which place. Fortunately, I hit Hawaii. And we all decided that after our 2-year was up, each place we would change. They would come, the Philippine group would come to Hawaii, and we would go to the Philippines. Of course, we never got to do that. Anyway, while we were, and I guess it was November the 9th, the 3 of us ended up in Honolulu. After a 5-year voyage on a ship called the Edelin. It had been a old fishing boat up in Alaska, but it was very comfortable for us. Anyway, we were 2 of us were assigned to Tripler General Hospital. 1 was assigned to Schofield Barracks, and that was on November the 9th. So we were enjoying our time there and everything, and then we worked 6.5 days a week. We had half days off on Sundays. Those were our only time off. And on December the 7th, which of course was Sunday, I was sound asleep in bed. I'd been at Hickam Field the night before at the Officers Club having a ball, dancing, and I don't know what time it was when I got home, but anyway, I was sound asleep. And 2 of our night nurses had come off duty and were taking a walk in King Kamehameha's Gardens, which was an area adjoining our hospital grounds at that time. And they were still in their uniforms, they'd eaten their breakfast and had decided to take a walk on this gorgeous morning. So they were walking along, and a road led from King Street, which is the main street of Honolulu at that time, over into Hickam Field, where our Army big bombers were. And they were walking along there when a general staff car came along and stopped them, and the general got out and said, "Are you nurses from Tripler?" And they said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "Well, get back to your post immediately. We're being attacked by the Japanese." So they came rushing back, of course, and woke us all up, all of us were sleeping, and to tell us that we were being attacked by the Japanese. And we thought they were joking at first, you know, because we hadn't heard anything. I mean, we were so used to hearing noises, especially on Sunday mornings. They did a lot of maneuvering, and a lot of guns were shot off and so forth. So if we had heard it, we didn't pay too much attention to it, but most of us, I think, were sleeping and hadn't heard it. Anyway, about that time, our phone rang telling all of us to report on duty immediately from our phone in the barracks. So we all got up and got dressed, and 3 of us were ascending the stairs that led from our nurses' barracks up to the hospital, which was up on a little knoll. And as we were climbing up these stairs, we could look over, we could see the harbor. And of course, we could see the black smoke pouring off the ships and hear all the explosions and could really tell, you know, it really shocked us into realizing something is going on. And about that time, we looked up and this plane was flying right even with us as we were on the stairs. And he was looking right out at us, and he was a Japanese pilot. And we didn't know at the time, but the emblems on the wing were the rising sun, which of course we weren't familiar with at that time. Anyway, he looked over and saw us, the three of us. He waved to us, and we all three waved back, and just automatically. And later on, we were very happy that he didn't want to waste a bomb or anything on three nurses climbing up the stairs. Well, of course, when we got up to our hospital, it was packed. Ambulances were lined up at the doors with all kinds of casualties, and especially severe burns. One of the enlisted men's barracks at Hickam Field had received a direct hit. A large barracks received a direct hit from a Japanese plane. So we had these severe, terrible burn cases that were, because of course, at that hour of the morning, there were a lot of men still in bed, you know, on Sunday morning, still not getting up. Anyway, we had, I remember I had 3 patients. Oh, I had been, the ward I was assigned to was the obstetrics ward. And by this time, they had eliminated all of our OB patients had been sent either home or to the civilian hospital in Honolulu. So my beds were available for these patients. My first 3 patients, as I recall, were severely burned. And as I was attempting to insert an IV needle into the arm of one of them, as I wiped an alcohol sponge over the area before I inserted the needle, the entire skin of his forearm came off in one big piece. And that was kind of frightening, I'll have to admit. Anyway, my first 3 patients, I remember, expired within a very short time before we could really do much of anything for them. And after that, things calmed down a little bit. We had, of course, filled up our beds very rapidly with all types of injuries. And all day long, the doctors and the nurses and the corpsmen were working as hard as they could go, trying to ease the pains and care for these various injuries that we saw in front of us. Well, anyway, as we were, oh yeah, I remember when we got climbing up the stairs, when we went to enter the building, all of our surgical rooms were filled up to capacity. And there was a neurosurgeon that was visiting over in Hawaii, not in the service at all, but he found his way out to the hospital, and he was doing brain surgery right on the lanai of the hospital, one of the first things I saw when we went in. He later on was on TV about, 3 or 4 years ago. On December 7th, he was interviewed and told about his experience that day at Pearl Harbor. Anyway, we proceeded then taking care of all our patients, and we had, let me see if I've forgotten anything. About 5 o'clock, the chief nurse came around and told, probably around 6 of us, that we were to go off duty and try to relax a little bit and come back on. They needed about 6 or 7 more night nurses for night duty. So we had 2 hours from 5 o'clock till 7. And as I recall, it was very difficult to relax after what we had seen. Anyway, we reported back on duty at 7 o'clock, and they had brought down all these guards from Schofield Barracks, which we'd never had before around the hospital. And I remember one incident was that one of the guards, we had used the theater as a morgue because our hospital morgue was filled up in nothing flat. So they were putting bodies in the theater. And as this guard was going around. He thought he heard a moaning noise coming from the theater, and he called the superior officer. They went in, and sure enough, they found a man, a young man, who was still alive in the morgue. And they brought him out and brought him into the ward. And as far as I know, that fella never found out that he had been in the morgue. He got very well and came around very good. And anyway, that night was, when I went on duty that night, I had to go down to this temporary buildings that they had opened up down at the base of our grounds that had been closed up. They told us it had been there since World War I and never been used. But they had managed to put about 35 beds in each of them. And as I went in, was taken in by a guard because this was the blackest night I think I've ever seen. There wasn't a light, and we weren't allowed to turn on any light anywhere. They told us it would be shot out if we turned on any light. And anyway, the guard had taken me down to this building, which I had never even seen before. And when he took me in, my corpsman was standing at the door waiting for us. And he said, "Lieutenant, you're not going to believe this. We have a Japanese doctor." And that, of course, gave us kind of a shock. But he was a captain in our medical corps. And as the night went on, he could tell we were quite nervous. In fact, every time I turned around, my corpsman was right at my heels. You know, he was helping me a lot by holding the flashlight. They issued us a flashlight with blue paper over it, which was real eerie at best, but we could manage to see enough to do dressings and give injections and so forth and so on. Anyway, it was as we around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, things calmed down a little bit. We were able to, the doctors could tell that we were quite nervous about him because, well, in the first place, it was rumored that the Japanese were coming back that night. All our defenses were down, and everybody thought that they were going to come back and take over the island. Anyway, what was I saying about the, I forget what I was talking about. Oh yeah, the Japanese doctor sat us down, and he said he wanted us to know that he had been in the United States Army for several years in the medical corps. He had been over here and had gone to Johns Hopkins Medical School, which was one of the top medical schools at that time, and I guess still is. But he said, my family, my parents are still in Tokyo. But he said they have no idea what they've gotten into. And he assured us that he was all right. And it turned out later on that he had joined the Japanese unit that invaded Italy. And he was written up in Time magazine. His picture was on the front page of Time magazine. And he received the DSC for his bravery on the battlefield. So he turned out to be a true blue American and a very excellent doctor. Anyway, we went through the night with taking care of all our patients and doing everything. When morning came, we had never been able to set up charts on our patients. Am I getting late?
Oh, if you could, just in a few more minutes.
Okay. When our, in order to, we had charts that we kept, of course, like every other hospital does on each patient. And we just were not able to get anything like that organized. And the only thing we did keep track of the medications on a slip of paper, either by their bed or wrapped around their wrist or something, so we wouldn't over-medicate them with narcotics or anything like that. Anyway, when morning came, they had asked us to please try to get charts set up on your patients. So I was going around the room, the ward, with getting my name, rank, and serial number, and where your injuries are, and blah, blah, blah. And I came to this one tall, lanky lad from Tennessee, and I asked him, name, rank, and serial number, and where were you wounded? He said, "Ma'am, if you'd been shot where I was shot, you wouldn't have been hurt at all." this is what it caused. Everybody that was within hearing distance, of course, all these sick men heard him, and they were all laughing. I guess it was kind of a good thing, you know. I was in shock, but anyway, that was kind of the way we ended up that day. And well, I could go on for a long time, but I won't. I mean, that's probably enough.
Is there anything you'd like to share with them, Harry, that you want to plant a question and have them be sure to ask you about?
Well,
you know, something?
Let's see. There was what did I have written down here? Like.
Well, I know they'll have some for you.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I just. I can't think of anything that would be, you know, outstanding. Actually, I was supposed to get transferred to Guam in April of '45, and this was another kind of funny thing that happened. They told us that we could, those of us that at least had been there for Pearl Harbor, had never been home, of course, and that they would give us 2 weeks leave to go back home before we went to Guam. So we were looking forward to that. Of course, after 3.5 years, it was wonderful to get back and see friends at home. And while we were there, typical of the Army, they discovered we hadn't had basic training. And so we were notified to report to Miami Beach immediately for basic training after 4.5 years in the service. So anyway, we did. We went down and were hip-hopping around the parade grounds with the sergeant blowing his whistle at us. And, after about, I think we were there about 5 days, when the sergeant came out, blew his whistle, told us to halt. So we all halted, and he said, "I just want to tell you all that the war in Europe is over." And with that, our orders for Guam were canceled, and I ended up at Percy Jones General Hospital in Battle Creek, Michigan, which was an amputee center, where I remained till I got my discharge in January of 1946.
Well, I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1940 when I was 16 years old. I turned 16 in March and enlisted in the Marine Corps in June. So in December 7th, I was somewhere over 16, but less than 18, I guess. I wasn't at Pearl Harbor. I was at Naval Air Station Kaneohe Bay, and we were the first military installation to come under attack. We got attacked about, I don't know, whoever's keeping score, we got probably attacked about 10 minutes before Pearl Harbor. Actually, they hit all the air stations, obviously, before they hit the ships, because the ships can't fly, but the planes can, so they wanted to do, after the attack was over, they wanted to maintain air superiority, and they did quite well at that. I was getting ready to go on guard duty that morning. I had the 8 to 12 on the main gate, and I was a PFC, which I thought was pretty darn good. I only had a little over a year in the Marine Corps, and that was really moving along. Needless to say, I didn't make it. We just got through with breakfast, and we were milling around in the barracks, had all our fresh starch khaki on, and we're getting ready, as I say, to go on guard duty. Actually, what we were waiting for was the guard truck to come take us down to the guardhouse, because the guard of the day everybody would stay in the guardhouse, and they were posting the guard, and then they would come back and pick us, all the rest of us up, and take us down there. When all of us, well, we heard the as it turned out, bombing, but we just heard the explosions, and the Naval Air Station was under construction, and it was when you're building things on solid coral, you got to blow things up. So we didn't pay too much attention to it, but then somebody says, "Well, hell, these are civil service workers. They don't work on Sunday," and we still hear it. And so pretty soon, one of the sergeants comes racing in, and there's ladies present, so I won't tell you what he said. But the theme was, "Get your rifles and get your butts in gear. We're under attack." Well, in those days, surprisingly enough, we all were allowed to keep our own rifles. And we all had our rifles right by our bunk. And despite some of the stories you heard about not being able to get ammunition, we just went in and busted the door down. We had all the ammunition we wanted. But a couple of us had a brilliant idea. We had just gotten a water-cooled machine gun. Now, it was a .30 caliber, and they were using it for instruction purpose because this was a guard company, and we weren't too familiar with machine guns, and that's for sure. And so me and my buddy, we decided we're going to go up on the second deck, go up on the roof, and as the planes were banking around we were a PBY station. All they were amphibious planes down there, and as they banked around the hangars and strafing the planes, they would come right by the barracks. We thought, hell, this is a great idea. We can get this machine gun up there, and man, we'd probably win the war here. So I got the machine gun up there. When I opened the hatch to get up on the roof, I stuck my head out, and here's this plane out there, and here's this Jap pilot, and I could almost, it wasn't that close, but I could almost reach out and touch him. And he was grinning at me or laughing at me, but I could see his teeth, and I'll never forget it. And I shook my hand. I'm gonna get you. But anyway, we got the gun up there, and we're all set to go. And here again, where we didn't have any ammunition, we had training ammunition. You know that stuff, Mike, where they had all the holes in it. So here I'm standing, and I've got myself braced, and I'm shooting at a plane doing about 250 miles an hour with my trusty .03, and obviously I didn't hit him, but I could see from where I could see down at the hangar bay, and down both hangars were on fire. We had 36 PBYs down there, and 33 of them were burning. The only reason the other 3 weren't burning is because they were up in the air scouting so we wouldn't get hit by surprise attacks. But apparently that didn't work. Actually, those 3 planes were coming in, and one of them seen the Japanese formations, and guess what? That was the plane that couldn't transmit. It could receive, but it couldn't transmit. So they knew what was going on, but they couldn't say, hey, here they are out here. But after the first attack, one of the sergeants grabbed me and said, get a 6x, and that's a truck, and go down to the dependents' quarters, which was about a half a mile, quarter of a mile away, and start loading the women and children up and evacuate them. I was going to put them in one of the ammunition bunkers, which I did. But as we had everybody in a couple of these trucks, well, here comes the Japs again. They started strafing us, but fortunately they didn't hit anything. We did shoot down on the station. We knocked down three planes. Don't ask me how, but we did. But a little funny. That evening or that afternoon, late in the day, again I was pressed into service to take a sentry out. We had a little fixed aircraft landing field just for small auxiliary. You couldn't land anything big out there, and they had this field full of wheelbarrows and rocks and who knows, anything that would keep a plane from landing. They had it out there, and I was standing with this ensign, and he says, "Won't land here tonight." And we could hear him up there, but we couldn't see him at the moment. And here they come, and there was 2 planes off of the Enterprise, and they actually landed. How, I don't know, but of course they made carrier landings, and they were bouncing around. And when they got out of those, well, one of them lost a wing, and the other I think, as landing gear. But anyway, when they got out, you never seen two men that were, what was that word you used? Pissed off. They were mad because there was 8 planes that left the Enterprise and 6 of them got shot down over Pearl Harbor. And these two, somehow or another, got out of there and they come over and they seen us landing. And they actually landed there. And the ensign, after he got over the shock of the fact that they actually landed there, explained that, "Sir, we're in a war." Well, I never knew officers spoke that way. But anyway, I left there in July of 40. Actually, that was where I learned to not volunteer. I left there in July of 1942, and I went into the 2nd Marine Division because we had this young, good-looking captain with all kinds of stuff on, and he was looking for volunteers. And I'd made corporal by then, and he was telling me about I'd probably be at least a sergeant major by the time I got through there. So I went back to the barracks, and I told this buddy of mine that, as I'm leaving here, I'm gone. Day after tomorrow, whatever day it was. And of course, I'm the youngest kid in the barracks, and you stupid idiot, and I'm going to go over and talk to that guy and get you out of that. So 2 days later, the 2 of us left. So anyway, we had the good fortune of going into Guadalcanal. That was a lot of fun and games. And then we went into Rawa, and I'm glad I only have 12 minutes because I'm about done with that. As you may know, if you've read any of the booklets or anything, we had to wade ashore. The first 3 waves got in. They were in amphibious tractors. We had 125 amphibious tractors, and the first 3 waves got in ashore pretty good. But there was only 25 amphibious tractors left after that, and the rest of us were in Higgins boats, and we had to drop about 800,000 yards out on the reef and wade ashore. And well, we were catching fire from the pier. We were catching fire from a sunken ship out here, and we were catching fire from the shore. And I think every unit there took at least 60% casualties. So for the first 2 days, we didn't even know who was winning. I still don't know who won. Had over 1,000 Marines killed and well over 2,000 wounded. So you can see the ratio between wounded in action, killed in action was extremely high, extremely, 2 to 1. But anyway, then I went to Saipan. We done so good on Tarawa, they let us be in the first wave on Saipan.